Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan, and I am here with Hunter and Matt, and we are your Blue Division breakdown crew for the MDL Season 3, Week 3. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm doing great.
I am excellent, fresh off of 5 weeks, so ready to jump back in.
Yes, we're not going to talk too much about future matches, but there is a big one coming up next week that may be semi-important that might get mentioned here and there. But as you guys can tell, we didn't know if this was VGC draft or a spelling bee this week. Hunter, how do you spell Wigglytuff?
um, it's Wigglytoughh. That's how you spell it. Wiggly tough.
Thank you very much, Hunter. All right, but without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the breakdown. So this first battle, we had Hunter against Toxic, the weekly pick'ems. Hunter was the favorite coming into this matchup, and it was a matchup of two winless coaches, so it was really important for both of them to get on the right foot. So game one, I think Hunter played really well. He positioned the Thunderous to do a lot of damage early, and then the Wigglytuff in the late game was actually quite impressive. Wigglytuff does wall a lot of common Dragapult sets. If the Dragapult runs Steel Wing, that's a different category altogether. But most common Dragapult sets, especially ones that look like they match up well into Hunter's team, do get walled by the Wigglytuff. So I think that was a really good call. And the Specs Wigglytuff in the late game was able to secure a pretty clean victory for Hunter in game one. In game two, it was a bit more interesting as there was the potential that Togedemaru redirecting some Thunderous attacks away from Blastoise could let Blastoise start doing some major damage. And as you can see, Blastoise was the kill leader for Toxic as well. So Blastoise did come both games and put in some major work in both games because Dragapult was fairly neutered. But overall, Hunter was able to position himself again in a position where the Specs Wigglytuff combined with the Scrafty were able to clean up the Togedemaru and the Dragapult that were in the back. So before we get into it too much, Hunter, I did have a quick question about the Wigglytuff set. I noticed you had Helping Hand on the Specs set. Can you talk to me about like what calcs the Helping Hand was helping you hit with other things that made you feel okay locking into it with Specs?
Yeah, sure. So it was basically just to try and beef up the Thunders a little bit. I know it is actually a roll for me to KO Dragapult with Airstream at +1. So with the and that's assuming he Worm wins the Thunderous. So it's actually a roll. And it's like very heavily in his favor. It's a very low percentage for me to pick up the KO with Airstream. So I figured that with Helping Hand on Wigglytuff, I could potentially bring it in on maybe if Metagross died, or maybe if Scrafty got eject button, I could bring in the Wigglytuff and then pick up the KO with the Helping Hand, assuming Clefairy's done, or KO'd actually. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do think that the Thundurus and Wigglytuff were both excellent calls this week, especially when you see what Toxic brought. I didn't really realize how much Wigglytuff did wall the Dragapult until I started watching the match and think to myself, like, what in the world could this thing have that's actually gonna hit the Wigglytuff? So I thought that was a lot of good prep on your side. I did pick Thundurus as your most important mon heading into the matchup, and I do feel somewhat justified in that selection. But Matt, why don't you talk us through a little bit about what you saw in this matchup as well?
Mainly what I saw was a favorable matchup, frankly, on Hunter's side. I think Toxic inevitably going to have a difficult time dealing with the Metagross and Thundurus, especially the Thundurus. And it also kind of revealed one of the I guess one of the issues that I have with Toxic's draft. Beforehand, I think earlier in the season, it felt kind of like just I've said this before, kind of a mishmash of decent Pokemon that were kind of thrown together that don't necessarily work together in any obvious ways. There's some synergy, but it mostly has to do with the top of his draft. the middle tier picks just seem to be kind of like middling speed Pokemon with mediocre offense. I think you can say that about Blastoise, Crocodile, Togedemaru, Frost Arena. And what I saw in this match was that in the like outside of Toxic's Dynamax, his draft I think has kind of an issue closing games out because he doesn't really have enough of that speed and offense combination, or even let's say maybe a Trick Room mode to sweep in the late game, or something like that. I think a lot of these like middling speed Pokemon with not much offense, they're gonna have a lot more trouble closing out games, and even something like Dragapult, if you're not using it as a max physical Dragapult's gonna have a lot of trouble closing out games because it can't really kill things fast enough. The Dragon Darts is not it's not a big nuke on one thing. It's being split between two Mons, and then you have stuff like Fly and Phantom Force, which take 2 turns to use. So I think that's one of the things that was revealed to me through this match, that he might want to patch up on his team. Just the ability to close out games a little bit better. But yeah, it's no surprise to me that Hunter won this one, given the team matchup on paper. I think Toxic was going to have a pretty tough time dealing with Thundurus in particular.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Fly was clicked more in this match as a non-max move than in any match I've ever seen before. I'm pretty certain. There were so many times where something was flying. So it was a pretty interesting matchup this way, but Thundurus is a hard time for his team, and Toxic was running a more support-oriented Blastoise, and it ended up his kill leader. So I think that tells you a little bit about the way that his team is constructed. It does lack punch at times. Like the Dragapult, when it's the physical Dragapult, when it isn't maxed, its attacks do take those 2 turns, so if the max is over, your only threat to deal damage in one turn is Zing Zap from Togedemaru or an attack from the Blastoise. So I could see where he is sort of missing that throughput issue. So he's got a lot of cool tools that I think he's figuring out the puzzle, and I think each week he's looking better playing that way. But I think what he's missing is sort of like that blowtorch that can just finish off a team once he's started arranging the puzzles around it. He's got the edges of the puzzle figured out. He just needs to figure out, okay, what can punch through the middle of it. I'm mixing metaphors, but if that sort of makes sense.
I think that makes sense, yeah.
But with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the next matchup. Hunter, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, sure. So a couple things before I get into this game. I just wanted to say that I want to give a little bit of credit to Dan on some pretty cool sets that I saw. In his video, he revealed that he was weakness policy on Primarina. I thought that was pretty cool. And then on top of that, he was also AV Arcanine, and I think that was actually really, really crucial, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But I thought it was really smart because a lot of Charles's better Dynamax options, aside from Mudsdale obviously, are all special, and they can all threaten the Arcanine with very powerful special Dynamax moves. So I thought the AV on Arcanine was pretty nice, especially in game 1. Perfect segue, actually. So Dan leads the Tornadus Arcanine, right? Because he intends to Dynamax the Arcanine, and he pairs it with the Tornadus and with the Mental Herb. So he guarantees Trick Room unless Lipard fakes out. And Charles actually does lead the Lipard with the Corviknight, and Dan realizes like the lack of offense towards Arcanine a little bit, so he Dynamaxes it and basically just gets Tailwind up and just kind of just wrecks house with Arcanine a little bit. I think turn 2 or 3, I can't really remember, I'm sorry, but Dan predicts the Naganadel switching in, and Max Quakes into the Lipard slot, and takes a pretty big lead in that game, and that kind of swung the momentum in his favor if it wasn't already in his favor, and started maxing Max Quaking, and now he's at technically +2 special defense with the Assault Vest and the Max Quake boost. So and then Charles brings in the Gastrodon. It just kind of can't really match the offense of Dan's Dynamaxed Arcanine with the Solar Beam tech and the Sun, and then even with the Rindo Berry, like as well as like Arcanine just being specially defense boosted with sun and grassy terrain, which nerfs both the Gastrodon and stabs. It was just a hard time for Charles to win that game. I want to commend Dan for another really good read that he made. He read the Gastrodon Max Guard and actually doubled into the Corviknight slot. And Charles actually swapped that out into Lipard, and then Lipard pretty much went down for free just because Dan made a great read. He with the combination of Air Slash from Tornadus and the Heat Wave from Arcanine. So Tornado pretty much goes down to the Max Hailstorm on the following turn, and Dan brings in Garchomp and finishes off game 1. Dan mentioned in his video that the game was actually a lot closer than the differential show, and I actually pretty much agree with that. I just think that once Arcanine started boosting and got the sun up and started hitting the Gastrodon with all the solar beams and max overgrowth, like I just think it was just a little bit too much for that those four to handle. So going into game 2, Charles leads the Naganadel Lipard versus Dan's Primarina and Tornadus, and I just wanted to give a little bit of credit to Charles because in my eyes, he made a pretty good adjustment to try and deny the Tailwind with the Fake Out and Draco Meteor. But it's actually pretty unfortunate because Dan led the Primarina and just Starfalled into the Naganadel and took it out, which was a lot of the offensive pressure that Charles had on his team with the 4 that he brought. Dan didn't know that at the time because like after Naganadel goes down, Charles brings in the Mudsdale and Dan's positioning is a little awkward, right? Because he's expecting the Gastrodon on the back, so he doesn't want to Geyser into the Mudsdale. So he's forced to go for either Overgrowth or Starfall, and he goes for Overgrowth into the Mudsdale slot, but Charles switches it into Eldegoss, and then U-turns with the Lipard for the Mudsdale. So that was actually a pretty cool turn from Charles. Unfortunate that the grassy terrain got up though, because that's also nerfing Mudsdale's max quakes and stuff like that. So Mudsdale and Eldegoss take really good chip from the Heat Wave from Arcanine, and then Charles is like I think that he was in a pretty similar situation like game 1, just not enough offense to match Dan's Dynamax, and the Dynamax was Primarina in this game, and he went for the Bullet Punch, Weakness Policy, Stamina Mudsdale. I think that was really cool. And the only issue is it was just a little too late considering that the Primarina is already maxed and Dan's already in a really good position. But I mean, it was a really cool set that he brought. So since he saw the Eldegoss, then he knows that there's no Gastrodon, so Primarina can just Geyser for days. And Dan picks up game 2 with Dynamax Primarina. So my overall thoughts on this game were I think that Charles, like, he brought the mons that he needed to. It's just that I feel like Dan adjusted and just knew his win condition immediately, and I think Charles played great. Like, I don't think that there was a single turn that Charles necessarily like misplayed. I think it was just more of Dan just knowing what he needed to do, and Dan was just playing superb. And I don't really think that Charles could have done anything about that, especially with the matchup that Dan had with the Assault Vest Arcanine and the Primarina Max versus the Mudsdale set. So Matt, what do you think about this game?
This game seems pretty straightforward to me. Honestly, there were I think there were 2 big nails in the coffin, one in each game, which you had touched on. But game 1 with the Naganadel switching in on the Max Quake, and then game 2. Charles just not bringing the Gastrodon when Primarina was the max option of choice on Dan's side. I think both of those, with both of those errors, all Dan really had to do was not throw the game, and he had it locked down pretty easily. So I think those are just the Naganadel in particular. I think might have just been Charles being a little bit too reckless. I think he probably would have been better off just staying in and kind of riding out the Dynamax on the Arcanine, even if Lipard's just sitting there not doing anything. It was definitely risky to try to go into Naganadel there, and obviously Dan was able to take advantage of that risk. So yeah, I think it was pretty straightforward with those 2 errors from Charles' side.
Yeah, on my end in the game, there was one period in game 2 that I think I did misplay substantially upon review, and with ideal play, Charles could have punished it, which was when I max Overgrowth into the Mudsdale, I should have Starfalled there, because that does also cover for the Eldegoss, whereas Overgrowth only covers for the Mudsdale or the Gastrodon and not the Eldegoss. So the Starfall would have kept up Misty Terrain, and then because I didn't Starfall, he had the opportunity to Sleep Powder into the Primarina the following turn if he max guarded on that Mudsdale, in which case the Mudsdale would have the opportunity to get its boosts off, KO the Primarina likely, and then sweep through from there. So I think that was a bit of a misplay on my part, but otherwise I do think I played both game 1 and game 2 pretty cleanly.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have. I don't think that this is a. I don't think this game is emblematic of how good Charles is in general. We saw him play. Hunter and I saw him play in season 1. He almost beat me too. So I'd like to see how this kind of a matchup goes. Without those, like I said, those big nails in the coffin. I think it would have been quite a bit closer if those two things in particular hadn't happened.
Right.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. But with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the last game of the week. Matt, why don't you break this one down for us?
Okay, so the first game here was rather straightforward. It was really just a Riolu Cinderace sweep. Riolu with that signature prankster coaching. The Cinderace maxed immediately, and using all 3 of its max moves, it just KO'd the Togetic, KO'd the Dynamax Stakataka, and brought the Vanillux down to Sash, and then once his Dynamax was over, it actually just finished off the Vanillux with a Sucker Punch, and then the Clefable Escavalier in the back were able to just take down the Arctozolt. So that was a pretty straightforward game. I think Dina was really able to take advantage of some of the weaknesses of Jess's team that I touched on last time. But I'll save that for after we go over game 2. But game 2, I think that in game 1, I think that not bringing the Incineroar on Jess's side was definitely a mistake, which she adjusted for. Because with the amount of destruction that came out of this Cinderace, it's looking at your own team, you would definitely want to throw Incineroar out there to make sure that that doesn't happen again, where it's not quite as bad. The Incineroar can mitigate that quite a bit. So she did bring Incineroar in game 2, but Dina responded to that by adjusting to her Rotom Wash. Jess went for a more Trick Room oriented game, whereas in game 1 she just maxed the Stakataka right off the bat without setting Trick Room first. She went with Slowbro and Togetic. Slowbro set up Trick Room, and the Rotom was able to take out the Togetic with a couple of Thunderbolts. And then we saw something very strange from the Slowbro. This was a very weird Slowbro set. It turned out to be, in addition to having Trick Room, turned out to have Iron Defense, Amnesia, and Stored Power. So sitting in front of this Rotom, it set up 2 Amnesias first, while the Togetic went down and the Stakataka came in. Rotom was able to get off a few attacks pretty freely. Next to the Clefable, Thunderbolted the Togetic a couple of times, got a couple of Hydro Pumps off on the stack, while the Slowbro set up a little bit, and then actually finished off the Clefable with a Stored Power at +4 special defense. The weird part here was when during that turn when the Slowbro KO'd the Clefable, the Stakataka ended up steel spiking into the Rotom, whereas you you would think, well, you would probably want to rockfall, right? It was revealed later that the IVs on the Stakataka were not exactly correct, and the Slowbro was actually slower in Trick Room and just did not catch that the turn before. So it kind of messed up her targeting. She thought she was steel spiking into the Clefable and going for the stored, and the stored power would be redirected into the Rotom, which is not exactly what happened. So the Rotom ended up taking a steel spike instead of what would have been a max rockfall. So that was a little unfortunate. It would have put her in a better position. I'm not 100% sure if it would be a winning position, but it would certainly be a whole lot better than doing minimal damage to the Rotom and allowing it to Dynamax, which is what it was able to do. It came in, well, the Escavalier came in, room service Escavalier, undersped the Stakataka, went for a close combat to KO it, and then the Max Rotom was able to put the Incineroar, which was Pasho Berry, which I think is actually a very, very good prep on Jess's part, was able to put the Pasho Berry Incineroar in range from a high jump kick from Riolu, and the Escavalier was able to finish off the Slowbro after that. So not nearly as straightforward as the first game. I think both Jess and Dina adjusted pretty well in that second game, but Dina was able to take it, and I think a big part of that was that she was kind of she was able to exploit some of the weaknesses that I had talked about in Jess's draft last week. She's still pretty overwhelmingly physical, so anything like Intimidate or the coaching we saw from Riolu, or Max Steel Spikes from a Cinderace or a Scavalier, anything like that is going to make it pretty hard for her to do adequate amounts of damage, because the Slowbro and the Vanillux here are really the only special attackers she actually has. And her team is also pretty fighting weak as well. Both of her tier 1s being weak to fighting, Stakataka having a double fighting weakness, and then her main fast mode here in the Vanillux and Arctizolts also both weak to fighting. So that was definitely a weakness that Dina was able to exploit. She had a close combat on a Escavalier plus double high jump kick, so that did very, very well for her. So I think if you're able to take out the Togetic early the way that she was, and just kind of spam fighting attacks, that's it's kind of difficult for Jess's draft to deal with that as well. So with that on Dina's side, I'm not surprised to see that her taking the win here. So what do you guys think?
So, go ahead,
Sorry,
Hunter.
go ahead. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Matt pretty much covered everything I want to say, but I just wanted to re-highlight things. In this league, it's extremely competitive, and a lot of these matches come down to team matchup and who adjusts better. The problem with this game is both players adjusted great, like Matt said. Jess could have used Incineroar game 1, but she just decided against it, and then game 2 she realized, like, oh, I guess Incineroar would be great, so she brought Incineroar, and then Dina's like, oh, well, maybe she brings Incineroar, so then Dina brings Rotom Wash, and it was just an adjustment battle in my eyes. And even though the Slowbro set was pretty cool, Dina still got the win. So I mean, that's pretty much all I had to say. What do you have to say, Dan?
Yeah, I've got a couple of interesting notes. I think that the IVs are a pretty big issue, actually, because there's the chance that Slowbro comes close to picking up the KO on Rotom that turn, whereas Stakataka doesn't. And I know this is the second season in a row where there has been some sort of genning issues that have made certain leverage games less than ideal for the coaches through no fault of their play or prep, but in the genning. So everyone check your mons. I know that is really important. I've caught one or two mistakes in a gen mon and just redone it, got it back correctly, and it became pretty crucial in the match. So personal feeling is that you always want to make sure you check your gen mons. And the second, just as Slowbro said, I thought it was really innovative, but I'm always nervous about that sort of Amnesia, Iron Defense Slowbro, or say a Cosmic Power Clefable, something like that, that's trying to max out its defenses, because you just are trying to fade a crit for the entire match when that's the case. Matt, I think you can attest to that personally, what trying to fade a crit for an entire match feels like, and then having it hit on the last turn. So
Yes, indeed.
So I don't know. I've never seen one of those sets not get crit, and I guess that might just be a sample size thing. But they're going to be taking so many attacks that it just seems like eventually it's going to happen. The Slowbro did have quite a lot of finishing power potentially, but I'm always nervous around those sets. I'll just put it like that. Not that it's necessarily bad. It's just it makes me really nervous when I watch it played, because I'm just like, a single crit and someone's day gets ruined here. On Dina's side, Room Service as Cavalier is one of my favorite things I've seen brought this season. Like, it's base speed 20 and she put Room Service on it. I absolutely adore that set and I hope it comes again, but the only time it can ever come is when you're going up against another base speed 20 or slower. So, like, against Jess specifically is one of the only times that makes sense, but I still love that set. But yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
any more thoughts on this match before we jump into the standings?
No, that's it for me.
I'll piggyback on just a couple of things you said. I on the Slowbro, I agree. It's a Pokemon like that is just sitting on the field taking so many hits throughout the course of the match that it's sort of likely to get crit at some point. I think in this match in particular, I probably would have liked to see the Slowbro have something that was a little bit more capable of taking on the Escavalier. I guess she probably was not anticipating Room Service on Escavalier because she did have the Heat Crash on Stack Attacka, so she was probably relying a little bit more on just get Trick Room up, underspeed it, hit it with Heat Crash or Max Flare from Stack. But I would have liked to see a Flamethrower on the Slowbro, or if she wanted to stick with this, go all in on this Stored Power stuff, maybe try to fit Slack Off on there instead of maybe even instead of Trick Room. But yeah, it was very interesting. I personally enjoy those kinds of sets. I don't know how good they often are, and I don't know how good this one was in this particular situation, but it was at least fun to watch.
It was really entertaining to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And yeah, just on the genning issue, I'll just echo the point that you made. Always check your mons, check everything on them, check the abilities, items, moves, stats, everything. We end up having a few genning issues like this every season. So I mean, at this point, people should know you gotta check your mons. You gotta check every single mon, everything on them every time. Which sounds kind of arduous, but it's if you have your stuff in Showdown, just cross-reference between your Switch and your computer screen. It goes pretty quick. It's not that big of a deal, and it can save you from something like this. So check your mons every time.
Yes, and also on the genning issue, if you are trying to gen a legendary that only has a single encounter to have specific IVs that aren't 31, you really need to use PK Hex instead of just typing it into the bot.
Yes, absolutely. Some of these Pokemon that come from these Dynamax adventures in particular have that problem because they have a certain amount of guaranteed 31 IVs. Sometimes the bot's not very good at making specific IVs. It usually is okay with 31 and 0, but it can get a little bit weird when you're trying to do anything else. And even 0 speed sometimes doesn't work with those mons. It will accidentally hyper train it sometimes, so check that stuff in particular too.
Yeah, absolutely. But with that being said, let's take a quick look at the standings. So right now we've got 3 undefeated teams, 2 per division, in Izzy, Matt, Dark, and me. We have, or that's 4 undefeated teams. Man, I can count. We also have 4 teams that have yet to pick up their first win, also 2 per division, with Burst, Grant, Jess, and Toxic. Besides the fact that Matt and I are matching up next week for Supremacy, what sticks out to you guys looking at these standings?
I guess I'll go first on this one. I think I'm just really surprised to see these players that and I mean, everybody's got to lose every once in a while, right? I mean, I'm not trying to like jinx you guys or anything like that, and I'm sorry if I did, but you can't win them all, obviously. Well, I mean, it's just kind of shocking to see that. I mean, Jess, Toxic, Grant, and Burst have all proven to have skill, in this league. So it's just kind of surprising that they all haven't picked up a win. I am 100% confident that will change. It's just, I mean, obviously with tough matchups, I know Jess went up against some pretty good players, and Toxic did too, as well as Burst and Grant. So they all went up against really, really good players. So I'm not really discrediting their losses per se, but I'm also kind of surprised. I mean, it's just kind of weird to see Jess 0-3. I'm not gonna lie, after winning season 1. So yeah, that's it.
Honestly, she's had the toughest schedule in the league. Her matchups have been me, Matt, and Dina, and between the 3 of us, there's 1 loss, and that was Dina to me.
Right. Like
it's been rough sledding for her. But Matt, do you have any thoughts on where we stand so far in the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising to see how polarized this all is. Four undefeated teams and 4 winless teams. I realize it's early in the season, but still a little bit surprising. But I think we have reason to believe that all 4 of these currently winless teams will pick up wins in the future. I don't think anyone's going to end the season at a 0-win record. Jess, in particular, we know she's done incredibly well in the past. She won the first season, made top 4 in the second season. She's not staying down here. I think I mentioned that last time. Grant, even though we haven't seen Grant in the past, he is a new coach for season 3. He has been playing fairly well in the 2 matches that he's had. So with if he keeps that up and potentially improves, there's no way he's staying down here at a winless record. And Burst and Toxic are both players. We've talked about this in previous breakdowns last season as well. These are both players who we've seen maybe struggle a little bit early on, and then learn how to use their team a little bit better, make some good transactions, and improve their play later on in the season, and even pick up some pretty significant wins. So I would not be surprised to see that happen with the 2 of them again. So definitely reason to believe that these all 4 of these guys can rise up.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so everyone knows, next week we will not be doing the breakdown in this format. Instead, the Red Division, boo, hiss, coaches, breakdown coaches and us will be coming together for a 6-person video to do the first league-wide power rankings after week 4. And there is a statistic that I'm hoping to see continue. Over the last 2 seasons in the MDL, Matt, you have a 100% match win rate against people not named Dan, and a 0% match win rate against people named Dan, and that's really a trend that I hope to see to continue into the next few weeks.
Dan, we played 1 time.
Yeah, I know. That's all I need.
That was good.
At worst, I fall to 50-50.
However you need to look at it to sleep at night.
All right, but with that being said, we will see you next week along with the Red Division coaches. On behalf of Hunter and Matt, this has been Dan as your Blue Division coaches, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.